the government is left with: the use of these police enforcement agencies to frighten and intimidate.
Former Guatemalan dictator Efrain Rios Montt was convicted in May of genocide of indigenous Ixil Mayans in the 1980s. But 10 days later, the country's top court overturned his conviction, citing judicial irregularities. Many international observers have spoken out against that decision, but reaction from Maya people has been mixed. Al Jazeera's David Mercer has more from Neba in northern Guatemala.
They all lost family during Guatemala's civil war. But to this group of ethnic Ixil Maya, the man charged with genocide against their people is a hero.
When Efrain Rios Montt came to power, he started giving us corn, beans, hoes, and machetes so that we could start to grow crops that had been destroyed by the guerrillas. He gave us roads and other infrastructure.
In April, hundreds of Ixil Maya marched in Guatemala City. They carried signs denying genocide had taken place and accused the international community of interfering with the trial. Critics countered that the protesters were paid to show up. What the protests made clear are the deep divisions that cut through the Maya Ixil community, both here in Neba and throughout the countryside. Local human rights advocate Juan Velasco says Rios Montt's old political allies are using their resources to divide the community.
Many times people have said there was no genocide in the Ixil region, but the people who say this have been manipulated. They too were victims of the war, but they're promised fertilizer and food, and they go along with it.
Elena de Paz was 12 years old when a group of soldiers gang-raped her and her mother, who later died from her injuries. She was one of nearly 100 people who testified for the prosecution at Rios Montt's trial. Since then, she says people have confronted her on the street and accused her of lying about her ordeal.
It hurts me when I hear people say that nothing happened here, because terrible things happened, and that's why we want justice. We lost an opportunity. If we were united, maybe Rios Montt would be in prison now.
Many here believe the country can't move forward until it faces the past. But in Guatemala's most haunted regions, the past is still very much present. David Mercer, Al Jazeera, Neba, Guatemala.
Well, Kathryn Johnson is Assistant Director at the Guatemala Human Rights Commission USA and joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Kathryn, welcome to the programme. It's clear that this trial has been hugely divisive, isn't it? What has been the impact on indigenous communities?
Well, like the rest of Guatemala, the indigenous communities are certainly divided by the trial. The mainstream media in Guatemala really covered the testimonies almost not at all, and had very little coverage of the trial. So actually a lot of the people in Guatemala, including in indigenous areas, didn't have a chance to read the testimonies and really hear the evidence presented that genocide was committed, for example, whereas much of the indigenous population in Guatemala, like those in the Ixil Triangle, suffered genocide as well.
Many people will be distressed that the original conviction was overturned, and the trial, of course, is due to restart later on in August. Is there hope among those victims that justice will yet be done?
I think that a lot of the victims really have lost faith in the justice system in Guatemala, seeing the conviction overturned so rapidly and so obviously because of pressure from the business community and other very powerful people within Guatemala. I think a lot of them are very disillusioned, and it's especially with the uncertainty going forward, even when the trial, with the trial scheduled to restart in March or April of next year, it's not clear at what point the trial will start, who exactly will be overseeing the trial, and what evidence will have to be represented, for example. So I think that there's really a loss of faith.
What has been the US's position on Montt? Because, of course, the US government used to back him during the Cold War. What's Washington saying about him now?
Certainly the U.S. did offer significant support during the Reagan administration during the Cold War. However, the United States during the trial has been somewhat supportive, certainly of the transitional justice in Guatemala. They sent Ambassador Stephen Rapp, who is the ambassador for war crimes, to Guatemala during the trial to support the process and support the rule of law in the country. And in fact, the United States has been criticized by the far right in Guatemala for supporting justice and the victims in this situation.
Kathryn, good to talk with you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Kathryn Johnson there from Human Rights Commission USA.
Thank you.
Now, Brazilian satirical cartoonist says he fears he may be assassinated or disappeared after 2 pro-police Facebook pages